Hi folks, Modelling Mark here again. Right, in this video I'm going to tackle the arms. These are quite interesting castings. There's bores that need to be parallel to each other and a set distance apart. There's smaller bores with the cotter pins that need to be perpendicular and again distance accurately from the main bores. And there's no real obvious places to index the casting from. So anyway, this is how I've tackled them. May not be the best way, but it's the way I did and it worked, so I'm happy. I'll start by putting the arm in the vise. You can see there's a bit of aluminium packing because one side of the casting is wider than the other. Now I've got the casting as level as I can. Now I'm just going to clean up the top surface with the end mill, so I've got a nice flat reference to work from. That's one side of the casting cleaned up. Now I can turn the casting over and repeat the exercise on the other side. Now there's two rectangular bosses, one on each end of the arm casting. If you look in the book, these are intended for holding the castings onto a faceplate. However, I'm using the mill to bore out the holes. I'm going to face off the end of these, then I can use these as a reference to index the position of the hole for the main bore. And then when I turn the casting on its side, I can use that as a reference to measure the position of the cotter pin. I think I'm only going to need one end to reference from, but I'll machine off both ends just in case. Now the casting's turned on its side in the vise, and I need to machine down the faces for the cotter pins. Now the front and the back of the arms are slightly different widths and there's no dimension given in the drawing. So what I've done is I've measured the thickness of the casting, taken the difference between the two and then put a shim under the thinner side so the casting is as level as I can get it. Now I'm machining the column side, which is the thicker side, and I've made a note of the final height of the cutter on the Z-axis. Now I've come over to the tool end of the arm which of course is a little bit thinner. So I'll drop the milling cutter, I'll clean up the casting, and then I'll make a note of the Z-axis height on that. Now, when I turn the casting over and machine the other side, I'll just come down to the same heights, so the casting should be nice and symmetrical. The arm's turned over in the vise now. I'll put shims under the arms which match the difference in thickness between the column end and the tool end. The arm is now level in the vise. Now, as long as I respect the difference between the Z height on the thick and the thin end, i.e. the column end and the tool end, then I'll end up with a nice symmetrical arm. Now I machined off this face of the lug. I machined this lug and the lug on the other end of the arm to exactly the same Z height. So I've got two flat surfaces parallel to the centre line of the part, so I can clamp it nice and flat and square. This is the setup for the next stage. What I need to do is find the centre of this boss, the centre of this boss, then measure to the end of this spigot. Then I can flip the part through 90 degrees and drill these two holes. The offset between that and that and that and that is important, but because I know here, I can measure all those on the DRO. It's in on an angle plate which has been clocked in. There's a couple of slip gauges to make sure it's parallel. Then it's just on a couple of 1, 2, 3 blocks to give me a better landing surface. I was lucky enough to find a blank arbor which was just about the same size as that boss, which is ideal for centering that. So that's centered, the DRO zeroed. You can see it's come down, it's nice and central. It's slightly offset because the distance between these two bosses is a little bit less than the 3.5 inches on the drawing. So I've split the difference to maintain the 3.5 inch hole centres. Now I'll indicate off there. You can see that one's got a green Sharpie on it, two arms, two different measurements. I need to make sure I know which is which. So that's got the green Sharpie on, and I'll write this measurement on my notepad in green Sharpie. The other arm's got red Sharpie on. And that gives me an offset of 1.125. This is the next setup. Angle plate still there, unmoved. The arm's now resting on these machined faces of these bosses, both ends, so the arm is horizontal. Toolmaker's clamp is just holding it back against the angle plate for now. And I've got these, this is not very well held, but once I've indicated off here, then I'm going to move this clamp round a bit. Now I can indicate off here, find the centre line for this hole, move across to this offset, drill in that hole, then move across to that one and drill that hole, and it all should be good. For the Y direction, I'm going to put a piece of bar in the chuck and move the table in and out until I get the best alignment with the casting. Now I've edge found off the end of their boss. I can accurately place the X position of the two cotter pin holes. The Y position of the holes isn't critical, so I've put a bar in the chuck and I've just lined up the Y position to get the best alignment on the casting. As usual, I'll centre drill, then drill out to 1/64 under a ½ inch, and then finally ream the hole to a ½ inch. The second hole gets drilled and reamed in the same manner. I won't bother showing you all the steps on this one. A quick test fit with the ½ inch brass bar, and we've got a nice sliding fit. Right, here's set up for the next boring operation. Again, angle plate. There's a couple of gauge blocks there to make sure the arm is parallel. It's sat on the 1, 2, 3 blocks. Now playing musical clamps here because I need to get to there to indicate, and then I need to get to there to clamp because the clamp will get in the way of boring here. Of course, once it's clamped down properly, then the toolmaker's clamp can come off. That will have done its job when it's clamped down firmly. Now I'm indexing off the end so that I can accurately locate the centres of the main bores ready for boring. Okay, that's that clamp in. Now this one can come off. Let's get the toolmaker's clamp. Now we can run this one down to set the Y position. Zero on the X and Y. Now I shall lock the table. Okay, so that's the mill set up. 0, 0 on the larger bore. Table's locked. We've got a little bit of space under there. So now I can get drilling. That's as far as I can go with the drill on this mill. That's reached its capacity. So now it's out with the boring head. Now the boring head I've got is a Chinese import. It came with these tool bits that are brazed carbide inserts, and I could not get a parallel bore out of it. Turned out the boring head itself is quite good, but the tool bits are complete and utter rubbish. So I got a bit of 6mm tool steel and ground my own tool bit. It looks like it's been chewed out by a badger, but the cutting tip is pretty good, and I did actually get a nice parallel bore and a good finish. As you can see, I've more or less finished the boring. I've just got the last couple of cuts to do. You can also see that I've inserted the brass bar for the cotter pins, so they're getting bored out to the right cutout, and then all I'll need to do is split them in half with the slitting saw. I'm using a telescopic bore gauge to check the bore, so I want to be fairly accurate. I'm also measuring both the bottom and the top of the bore to ensure that I've got a nice parallel bore. And for good measure, I'm double checking with the aluminium plug that I made. There's just a tiny smidgen left to go. Now that's going in, but it's just a little bit too tight. I really want a nice sliding fit, so I think a spring pass should do it. Now that's just the fit I was aiming for. A nice sliding fit with almost no perceptible wobble.
Yes, that's much better.
Now I just need to mark which cotter pin goes in which hole, so I can match them up again later. Okay, this is the arm after all the machining's finished. These square bosses need to be cut off and then filed flat or filed smooth. Then get a touch up with the file to make it look nice and pretty. And I do need to stamp the numbers for the cotters on each of these bushes. That's it, these came out very nicely. That's it for this video. The next video will be the machining of the table. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Thanks again, see you next time.